Welcome into No Punt Intended. I am your host today, Joshua Hudson. And as you can see by not seeing Joe or even Ryan, I'm kind of the last man standing of the trio today. We have to do a special pre-record because we've got another fantastic guest. Last week, we previewed the three worst teams record-wise in the NFL with CBS Sports Heath Cummings. So this week, we had to up the ante. And we gave our new special guest, Howard Bender from Fantasy Alarm, three even worse teams: the New York Jets, the New York Giants, and the Carolina Panthers. So filling in for Joe once again this week is going to be our main man, the young fantasy mind, Hutchinson Brown. So you'll see him squaring off with Howard Bender as we preview these teams. Stay tuned. Welcome into No Punt Intended, everybody. I am hosting today, Joshua Hudson. You can find me on Twitter at all right? The young fantasy mind, Hutchinson Brown, joining us at TYFMNFL on Twitter. And the man, the legend himself, he joined us for the first time last year as we previewed the three worst teams. And, well, let's be honest, we just had to bring him back for an encore. Howard Bender at RotoBuzzGuy on Twitter. Howard, how are we doing today?
We're doing real well, man. Always great to be back here, getting a chance to hang out with you, and of course, be able to get a chance to hang out with Hutch as well. Excited for the Fantasy Football Expo this summer. I get to hang with you guys in person, draft against you. But yeah, listen, man, it's nothing better than just breaking down bad teams and trying to find some diamonds in the rough.
Absolutely. Exactly. Hutch, how are we doing on this day, man?
Doing awesome. Yeah, super excited for the Expo this summer. Super excited for the draft. Super excited for everything on the Expo. And yeah, I mean, we were talking about earlier, like these are the few worst teams, but this is where you find the diamonds in the rough. This is where you potentially find those breakout players from the teams that nobody wants.
Should be exciting. So last week we looked at the Jaguars, the Lions, and the Houston Texans with, as I mentioned in the intro, Heath Cummings from CBS Sports. This week with Howard and Hutch, we are going over the New York Jets, the New York Giants, and the Carolina Panthers. So let's start with Howard's hometown Jets. Last year, they finished 4-13. They said, we're keeping the band together. Robert Saleh returns as head coach, Mike LaFleur, the offense, and they made some moves this offseason, especially in the draft with some quality offensive picks. In the first couple of rounds, they bring in stud running back Breece Hall out of Iowa State in the second round. 10th overall pick, Ohio State wide receiver Garrett Wilson. So I'm going to kind of go through and read off how we sort of break this down. And then we're going to let Hutch and Howard kind of tell us why Ryan and myself are right or wrong and, basically make us look like fools because they're a lot smarter than we are. So players with the most upside. Myself, I'm looking at Breece Hall. It's pretty obvious. The high second round pick, running back. This is an offense that's going to want to run the football. Ryan likes Zack Wilson. Hutch, you also like Zack Wilson. They've obviously done a lot to give him no excuses to take that sort of second-year leap. They, spend the first-round pick on Garrett Wilson. Last year's second-round pick, Elijah Moore. They signed Corey Davis last offseason. Hopefully he can stay healthy. He's got a pretty decent trio of wide receivers. Now has a running back behind him. Tell us why you like Zack Wilson, Hutch.
I mean, honestly, I feel like I would have preferred Breece Hall, honestly, on my list as the upside player, but I didn't want this to become the Breece Hall show with all three of us writing Breece Hall. So I did want to do something different. I did want to write Zack Wilson down because I do really like him. I mean, Josh kind of just illustrated it perfectly. There's just so much opportunity around him in this new offense. I mean, you got Garrett Wilson, you got Elijah Moore, you have Corey Davis out there, and Braxton Berrios, I believe he's still on the team, correct?
Yes,
yeah.
They re-signed him in the offseason.
You got a lot of weapons here. You got Michael Carter, Breece Hall out of the backfield, both great pass catchers coming out of the backfield. You got a growing offensive line. You just have a lot of pieces here built for Zack Wilson to succeed. And if you look down the stretch, honestly, when he came back from his injury, he didn't look that bad. I mean, if you look at his stats and you go back and watch some of those games, he looked a lot better. He started also running the football a lot more. He started getting some yards on the ground, and that was really, really interesting. That's one of the things we liked about Zack Wilson coming out of college was his ability to escape pressure, get some yards with his legs, and he started showing that down the stretch. If you look at his game logs, I mean, the dude was averaging like over 20 yards a game or 20, 30 yards a game on the ground. He scored a couple touchdowns in those last 6 games as well. I mean, Zack Wilson really started to run the football. And for fantasy, for quarterbacks, that's gold. So if he can take a step forward as a passer with all these weapons and start adding a little bit as a runner, maybe like 300-400 yards and a few touchdowns, I mean, he can be a pretty nice asset as a quarterback too in a super flex league if you get him there. Because I mean, right now he's barely going inside the top 24 quarterbacks for redraft leagues. Like he is not being valued at all as a high. He's not a highly valued quarterback at all in drafts, even in dynasty, not very much. Like I just bought him in a dynasty league for a 2023 first, and it looks like it's going to be a later first as well. Like, I mean, I'm very happy with that. So, and that's a super flex league. So I'll take that all value all day. I think Zack Wilson is going to have a nice breakout this year.
Howard.
Yeah, listen, I think that, you nailed it, Hutch, when you said it's a matter of Zack Wilson taking that next step forward. You see the Jets are doing the great rebuild. They've got, the Vera Tucker pick last year was absolutely huge. And then, they kind of helped build up the offensive line a little bit as well. A lot's going to hinge on Mekhi Becton, whether or not he can, stay completely healthy. When you carry that kind of weight on you and you're supposed to be moving laterally the way you do, it's going to be some wear and tear on the knees and on the ankles. But, for the most part, though, I'm pretty confident in this offensive line with what they've put together. Yeah, you're right. They've given him the weapons. He did take a step forward last year when he came back from injury, from what we had seen, what we had expected in camp. You saw game to game growth, which was encouraging there. So yeah, I think that this is another year in the system with the added weaponry here. I like the Garrett Wilson pick. I don't love the Garrett Wilson pick in comparison to some other rookie wide receivers who went, but securing Breece Hall, that was a huge move. It really was. I mean, Michael Carter has his merits, but Breece Hall is, that's my guy, off of this offense. That's the guy who I want to walk away with because, you look and you see, and that Robert Saleh is bringing over that West Coast style offense where they rotate the running backs in and out. I think Breece Hall and Michael Carter will kind of share that load, but I think Breece Hall has the talent to kind of push to be more of the bell cow and push Carter into an even more complimentary role. So, there's a lot of upside to the Jets here. Zack Wilson is definitely a guy that you want to watch. I've got a ton of him in some of these FC eliminators, right? These super flex drafts that everybody's doing. So I've got a bunch of him. I've got a bunch of Breece Hall as well. It's amazing, right? How amazing is this? Like, see, Hutch, it's so funny, right? Because I don't mean to point out your age, but I'm in my 50s, right? And I've never seen the Jets in the Super Bowl. So like, this is like, and it's been at least 20 years before since the Jets actually had a decent draft. So this is hope for me. This is a good time to be a Jets fan.
Yeah, it's been a while. And I want to just bring up a quick stat real quick for Zack Wilson. So in the first 5 games that he played in full, the first 5 weeks before the week 6 bye, he had 9 interceptions. In the last 6 games, he threw 1 interception.
Yeah. That's that type of growth. I mean, he spent, kind of in and out of the lineup a little bit, getting hurt. Becton being hurt last year, obviously that's a huge missing piece on that offensive line. George Fant took a big step forward as well, being, going from a journeyman lineman to kind of, helping solidify that left side. So, Howard, you touched on Breece Hall, that being kind of the guy that, you don't want to leave your drafts with. And I get that 100%. Biggest reason why he's my fantasy upside pick right now. And again, we're talking like the beginning of summer. His ADP is lower than Michael Carter's. Like, let's be honest. If you want one of these two guys going into this year, it's Breece Hall over Michael Carter. Like, Carter's going to provide that pass catching upside. But if these guys are healthy, Hall's going to see the majority of the rushing attempts, more than likely going to see the majority of the rushing touchdowns, especially inside the 5, the 10, and the 20. Carter's going to rack up those PPR numbers. We've seen this like San Francisco West Coast based offense that Kyle Shanahan runs where, these running backs are pretty much evenly splitting like pass catching opportunities and even rushing attempts opportunities. But a lot of that has to do with injuries, right? So if Breece Hall comes in and actually plays 15 to 17 games, who's to say he's not going to see 250 rushing attempts?
Exactly.
Like, I want those like that could very well be pushing 1,200 rushing yards. Like, a lot of people compare this guy to Jonathan Taylor coming out. I don't know if I would go that far based on measurables, but we know he's got speed. We know he can break tackles. If the Jets offensive line continues to take those steps forward, we could be seeing a really good rookie season out of Breece Hall, which could eventually propel the Jets to not a last place finish. Just going on a limb here.
Yeah. I mean, Breece Hall is tough for me. I like, if you see me on Twitter, if you see me on my like podcasts, like I absolutely love Breece Hall. I think he's a superstar in the making. The problem is for me in redraft, I think that Carter is still going to be a bit involved in the first half at least. And where he's going to be involved is going to cap Hall's fantasy value a lot because Carter showed last year that he's a specialty pass catching running back. He can catch passes very, very well. I mean, there was a game where he had like 15 catches. Like he was insane. Like he had some great catches this year, made some great plays. So he's likely going to slot in there for the first half, which for redraft kind of sucks because I expect more of a breakout from Breece Hall in the second half, kind of like what we saw from Jonathan Taylor in those last few games. I expect that kind of breakout where he eventually takes over that backfield. But I feel like the first half is going to be a bit frustrating for Breece Hall in redraft. So for redraft purposes, I'm holding back a little bit on Hall. But for Dynasty, I am all in. I love Breece Hall.
He's the easy 101 in rookie
draft. He is. It doesn't matter. It's a super flex. If there is any player that goes outside of Breece Hall at the 101, that was a very stupid pick. Breece Hall is the clear 101. I don't care. I don't care how much you like Drake London.
You heard it here first, people. Hutch thinks you're stupid for passing on Breece Hall.
Breece Hall is the 101. It's just not close. It's really not close.
He's definitely the 101. And, here's the thing. I don't necessarily know how long you hold down Breece Hall in this offensive scheme.
Yeah, it's really
let's
tough.
face it. We're only at OTAs right now, right? And then we've got, mini camp in June. Then we've got training camp starting up in July. And then we've got, a full legit preseason, right? I mean, we've kind of pushed through the COVID-19 shortened preseasons, delays in camps and things like that. So, I look at this and I think it's going to hinge on Breece Hall and his pass blocking. It really is because he can catch passes, and we did see him do that before. He wasn't like an exclusive pass catcher in college, but he was utilized in that fashion somewhat. And if his pass blocking is good, then I think the Jets are going to want to do it. It's kind of like, I'm not saying not the comp is more on opportunity than it is on talent level. When you look at San Francisco, Shanahan wanted to roll with Raheem Mostert. He really did. And we saw a lot of Raheem Mostert when he was healthy, and he was the dominant guy, right? Everybody who handcuffed him to Tevin Coleman was like, oh, what the hell are we doing here? So, I kind of look at this and I say that, Breece Hall in redraft, it could be a shared backfield for the first few weeks. But if Breece Hall does show the ability to pass block during training camp, during preseason games, and then develops it even more, I don't even think we need to wait for half the season. I think he will take that job. I'm not saying that Carter's going to be eliminated completely, but I could definitely see it being like an 80-20 kind of split.
Yeah, once Hall has that significant step where he kind of takes over, Michael Carter is going to be irrelevant unless Breece Hall is off the field with an injury. Once Breece Hall kind of takes over this backfield, Michael Carter is kind of done for rather than a handcuff. Like he's done for. He's going to be.
Yeah, I think you're going to see kind of a similar situation to this past year, like when Jonathan Taylor really sort of escalated, and you see like the Nyheim Hines kind of like, splits in the passing game and, getting a few rushing attempts here and there. Carter's always been in a split backfield, even going back to his UNC days. So I think this is a role that he can really excel in. It's just going to be one of those, he's going to be more of a best ball target because you never really know when Carter's pop games are going to be, to be that sort of optimal, like, flex player or running back too. Speaking of Carter, kind of looking at the player that's sort of the biggest trap on this team, Hutch, you agreed with Ryan in the Michael Carter pick. So I don't want to elaborate too much on that because we've kind of been talking about it. My guy here is Elijah Moore. And for me, this really lies more so in the fact that the Jets took a receiver in the top 10 this year after spending a second round pick on Elijah Moore. We saw some really big games from Elijah Moore this past year. That sort of rapport starting to build with Zack Wilson. Now you go into this year, does Wilson continue to focus on Moore, even though they drafted Garrett Wilson? Wilson had no issues targeting Corey Davis this past year. So, Howard, before you go into the player that you're most avoiding, I want to kind of get your quick thoughts on Elijah Moore in this offense now that Garrett Wilson is the presumed number one guy.
Well, I mean, I think it ties together actually beautifully with my pick of who I am avoiding, because I'm avoiding Corey Davis. I'm actually not a Corey Davis fan. I think he did fine in college, and everybody overhyped him as being this, amazing asset. And, he's flashed some potential here and there. But yeah, if you're rebuilding the Jets, Corey Davis he's your hired gun. He's the guy that you brought in, and you sign him via free agency, and you're hoping to to give your quarterback a weapon. You're building with Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore, right? I mean, Moore was a fantastic target for Zack Wilson last year. He absolutely loved throwing to him. So I think what we end up seeing here is that Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson kind of become the top two targets. And I bet you we see a little bit of a phase out eventually of Corey Davis, especially if they do intend to utilize the tight end, and much in the way that they utilize the tight end position in San Francisco. I'm not going to say that CJ Uzomah is the next George Kittle, but he will see some targets. We saw him targeted heavily in Cincinnati, and I think you're kind of building there. You got your veteran presence at the tight end spot, and you got your youth and your upside in the wide receivers. So I dig Elijah Moore this year. I'm more than happy to grab shares of him. Garrett Wilson, I like him, but I thought that there were a number of other wide receivers ahead of him. I actually thought Chris Olave at Ohio State was the better wide receiver than Garrett Wilson was. So Wilson's going to take a little time to develop, and I think he and Corey Davis will kind of be the competition for targets. The go-to is still going to be Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Hutch.
One last thing real quick. I mean, you guys were kind of mentioning how Zack Wilson loves to throw with Elijah Moore. It's interesting, though, because a lot of Elijah Moore's games where you look at that stretch, most of it was when Zack Wilson was actually gone. Most of his breakout games were with backup quarterbacks. He really only had one giant game with Zack Wilson, and then unfortunately he got hurt and was out for the season. But I think he's still going to be the number one of this offense, and I'm in on him. I don't think he's really a trap this year. I'm going to be in on Elijah Moore as a top 24 wide receiver. I like him for a breakout pick because the Jets saw what they can get from him. I mean, he was a top 5 fantasy wide receiver for a good stretch of games, and he was being hyper targeted in this offense, being used a ton. They saw what he can do, and I think he earned a really nice target share. And if Zack Wilson really does take that step, both of these guys could be top 20 wide receivers. I mean, we see it all the time where 2 receivers on a team can be top 20 guys. I mean, we've seen T. Higgins and Jamar Chase this past season. We've seen DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett over the past couple of years. If Zack Wilson really takes that next step as a passer and becomes like a top 12 NFL type of quarterback, which I'm not saying that will happen, but that's definitely in the range of outcomes, we could absolutely see a top 24 seasons from both Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore.
Yeah, for me, this biggest trap being Elijah Moore is simply baked into the ADP. So you've got Elijah Moore.
Yeah, his ADP could soar.
30. Yeah, I mean, it could very easily go up, but it could also plummet as more teams start to realize, hey, the Jets drafted Garrett Wilson to be their number one guy. Why is he currently sitting at wide receiver 43? So, and that's where I think that, that trap comes into play. I mean, we're recording this here in June, basically. and your ADPs are still going to fluctuate
June?
over the. Well, it will be by the time this episode records or airs.
Oh,
excuse me.
say.
So-
Yeah, by the time this episode airs, it'll be June.
I think
It's
I
May
like Rip
right
Van
now.
Winkle the end of May. What the hell?
Yeah. We missed a few days there.
We missed a few days. I'm gonna skip over Joe's sleepers and IDPs because he got too busy with work and forgot to fill them.
He
in.
actually
But
didn't put them
I'll
in.
I'll piggyback.
I love how you said skip over them like he put them in there. We're just not going to read them. Just Joe didn't put them in.
Yeah, Joe didn't put them in. But I'll kind of piggyback on something that Howard said. CJ Uzomah is going to be a screaming like he's basically free in drafts. I mean, you pay the guy $10 million a year. I wouldn't be surprised if he had.
They did bring in Tyler Conklin though, correct?
They brought in Conklin as well. Conklin's always been more
blocker.
He's a great blocker.
Yeah. He's a great blocker.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I don't think he's going to be used too much in the passing realm. Obviously, he showed this past year with Minnesota that it's something that he can do when called upon.
Yeah.
But that's going to be Uzomah's role. Uzomah's going to be that guy that when they need to, run 4 wide, maybe they push him out in the slot a little bit, but he can also run from inside as well. But it's going to be somebody that can be a security blanket for Zack Wilson when he gets in trouble. Instead of taking off and running, he's got somebody to dump it off to. So with that, we'll move on to the Giants. Last year, also 4-13. They cleaned the house. David Gettleman, he took his analytics or lack thereof out to Costa Rica or wherever the hell he's vacationing now. They bring in Brian Dable, new GM. What is it? Joe Shane, I believe is his name. And they also bring in a new offensive coordinator, Mike Kafka, who's the former QB coach with Andy Reid and the Chiefs. Obviously, this is going to be a Dable offense, so you're probably going to see some similarities to what he's run in Buffalo over the last 4 years. Probably not to the same degree because, let's face it, there is a huge talent gap with this team. For me, when I look at upside here, and Ryan and I kind of agree, Saquon Barkley is currently RB16 on fantasy.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I just didn't want to put Saquon because I didn't want to put the same player. I want to talk about different players, but I love Saquon.
And I know if Joe were here,
he
would be telling me I wouldn't even draft him at RB16, which I get it. Like, we've been perennially disappointed with Barkley over the last few years, but we've also seen the type of talent that he brings. And going through and looking at some of the history with Dable when he first came into Buffalo in 2017 and 2018, he ran the football a ton to take a lot of pressure off of his young quarterback, to let his young quarterback grow as a passer. And then we saw the type of leap that Josh Allen took in 2020 and then continued in 2021. The Giants did not really bring in any competition for Daniel Jones. They basically said this is going to be Daniel Jones or bust in 2022. Because let's face it, Tyrod Taylor, the only thing he's really good at is passing the baton to young passers. Nothing else.
Yeah.
So if Daniel Jones can't do it, what are they going to do? They're going to run the brakes off of Saquon Barkley. So it's just going to be a matter of, can he stay healthy? Because right now, his direct backup is Matt frickin' Breida, who I'm fairly certain hasn't seen over 100 carries in 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, they just did not bring anyone to compete with Saquon Barkley. They are confident in him. Like, they are saying, you know what, this is our guy, and we know he's been injured for the past couple of years, but we're going to stick with him. And turns out in camp, he's making a lot of great plays. He's making a lot of great catches in camp right now, so that's interesting to see. But yeah, Saquon Barkley, it's just so, like, every time I'm in a draft, it's so tough to click the draft button on him because you know the risk that you're drafting. Because RB16, look, it's low for the talent he is, but that's still a high pick. I mean, you're still looking like at probably a late second, early third, right? Like a second or third round pick there. Like, that's still a pretty high capital pick, like a bust there. Like, if we get the Saquon from last year at the second or third round, that's still pretty hurtful to your team. That's still pretty damaging.
He was outplayed by Devontae Booker last year.
Yeah, he was. Like, he was straight up outplayed by the backups last year. Like, it was like how every Kansas City Chief running back outplayed Kyle Lair. Like, it was really sad to watch Saquon just get outplayed by his backups. But Saquon Barkley, RB16 off the board, I think is definitely interesting. It's just, I can't heavily invest in him because of the risk he carries. I'll get him in a couple drafts, but I'm not going to heavily invest, because if you heavily invest in him and he doesn't work out, because if, like, you know, if you're like us, committed to fantasy football, playing a lot of different leagues, Like if you play in 6 leagues and draft him in like 3 and he puts up what he did last season or the year before, like that's going to kill your teams.
Yeah.
So I can't heavily invest in him. I'm only going to draft him in a couple leagues this year. I just can't do it.
Of course, the upside to that is you get him at RB16 and then you get rookie.
Yeah, that's the thing.
You're goals.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the thing is that we're looking at this Giants offense, and you're right. Brian Daboll's not going to bring over the Bills offense. He's going to base it like he's been basing it. They base it in the Erhardt-Perkins system, right, where they do like to use the some power running there, but that's more for kind of abbreviating the calls and making it easier for the quarterback to run an up-tempo offense, which is what the Giants want to do. And the Giants want to run this year an up-tempo offense. They want to do it. They want to tailor everything, because I was reading a couple of interviews actually with Daboll and Kafka, just trying to figure out, what their game plan is. And listen, I think Daboll is going to do exactly what he did in Buffalo. He's going to assess the situation of what he's got right now, and he's going to tailor his offensive scheme towards the strength of those players, especially if they're players who, he wants to continue with, whether it's, Kadarius Toney and Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones, however it's going to be. Daboll is going to be able to kind of make those adjustments. He's a coach that you're investing time in Daboll. This isn't going to be like, it doesn't work this year and Daboll's gone. It doesn't work in 2 years and Daboll's gone. You're looking at like a good 3 to 4 year development of this offense, which I think is fine. In the meantime here, what they are looking to do is they are looking to make their weaponry sort of interchangeable, almost like what the Patriots, have done, right? Where the Patriots, it was, Julian Edelman and a hodgepodge group of receivers, and you couldn't really pin, who the majority of targets were going to go to outside of Edelman. So I think that we're kind of looking at that right now with the Giants. They're going to use a lot of receiving weapons there. They're going to use Kadarius Toney. They're going to use Sterling Shepard. They're going to try and use Kenny Golladay as well. They're going to utilize Saquon Barkley heavily as a pass catcher, which is obviously his strength. I think the key here is, can this offensive line, which has been, it's in process of being rebuilt and should be a much more, advanced offensive line in comparison to what we've seen over the last 2 or 3 seasons with the Giants. If those guards and those tackles can pull, properly, and we can get some really nice, some outside zone blocking here. You're going to see a lot of inside zone, which is totally cool. It's totally fine, because that actually helps the younger offensive linemen when you use an inside blocking scheme, because that's much more similar to what they run in college. So the transition to the NFL is a little bit less. So I think the Giants are going to end up kind of utilizing that aspect of it, and do a lot of outside work. So, offensively speaking, listen, Saquon Barkley at RB16, of course I'll take him. Why not?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's huge talent. The thing is you kind of have to have a little bit of a short memory in fantasy football, right? Because coaching movement and schemes change so much, and the player movement is so intense that you have to look at really what's going on right now. And if that offensive line is, a step ahead of where it's been for the last 2 or 3 years, it's going to be a little bit more intriguing. I think they still kind of pick up the rear in the NFC East, but there's promise on the horizon.
Yeah, I think Daboll, I am very interested in this Giants offense. I have, I have a lot of, it's not that I'm excited. It's just that I have a lot of interest. I'm very intrigued, while a lot of people are just like trying to ignore the Giants offense like it doesn't exist. I'm very interested to see what Daboll can do, because I agree with Howard. I think he's going to try to bring out the strength of all his players. I think he's going to try to use the speed and the elusiveness of Kadarius Toney to his advantage. I think he's going to use the size and the frame of Kenny Golladay to his advantage, take some shots downfield. Daniel Jones is a great running quarterback. I think he's going to make some designed runs for Daniel Jones, use that. Saquon Barkley, amazing pass catcher out of the backfield, just overall amazing running back. He's going to get a heavy workload. And I think that if Brian Daboll can find the strengths in this Giants offense, he can lead this Giants team to, a top 20 offensive type of season, even with Daniel Jones at quarterback. I think that could totally happen if Daboll can find the strength in his players.
So one thing I want to touch on here before Howard, we go into your the player that you're gonna you want to leave this draft with, quote unquote, from this team.
Forced to.
Forced to.
You made me answer the question. You were like, you have to answer this question.
Well, at least you answered them. So I applaud your ability to follow directions.
Thank you very much.
We talk about like who the biggest trap is for us individually. Myself, I chose Kadarius Toney. Hutch agreed with me. Ryan typed in Wan'Dale Robinson. He was the chosen one, so to speak. He was the guy that Dable and Shane said, we want this guy, and they spent a second round pick on him, despite him being 5'8" and not even $180. So
yeah, I do want to say, can I say something real quick about my Kadarius Toney pick? The Kadarius Toney pick, I do think that, look, I think Kadarius Toney does have a lot of potential. I think he does have a lot of upside. But, I mean, Josh wrote it perfectly in here. He has a higher ADP right now than Kenny Golladay by a pretty significant amount. And I'm just not willing to do that. I'd rather draft Kenny Golladay 10 wide receiver spots later than draft Kadarius Toney as high as he's going. I think both have the equal amount of upside because I think it's going to be one or the other that really step up and take this number one role. I know a lot of people like Wan'Dale Robinson. I still think, and Sterling Shepard is around, but he just tore his Achilles. He's nearing 30. I don't think we're going to see much from him anymore. So I think it's either going to be Kenny Golladay or Kadarius Toney. And the reason why Kadarius Toney is a trap for me is because he's just being drafted so much higher. And I just don't see a reason for it because we've seen Kenny Golladay put up massive numbers. Like in a season, we've seen him put up top 10 numbers with Matthew Stafford for a full season. And while he was on the field the last year he was with Detroit, he put up some solid numbers as well. We've seen Kadarius Toney put up one good game. And in that good game, he punched someone in the face and got ejected from the game. That's what he did. We have not seen anything from Kadarius Toney. We've seen it from Kenny Golladay before. So I would rather bet on Kenny Golladay 10 spots later. And even in a vacuum, if you give me no ADP included, I'd rather bet on Kenny Golladay. They're paying him tons of money to play with the Giants right now. They're paying him tons and tons of money. I feel like they're going to want to use him because they're paying him so much. So I think that Kenny Golladay is the better value and the better pick right now, Kadarius Toney. It's not that I think Kadarius Toney is going to be bad or that he has no upside or no shot at all. It's just he's being drafted too high compared to Kenny Golladay right now.
So thanks for that segue, Hutch, because Howard, Golladay seems to be the guy that you're most avoiding. So tell us why.
I mean, I just, I don't think the Giants really did their due diligence on Kenny Golladay, and I think that the hip condition is a lot more serious than was really let on, right? Like you would sit there and you would think, okay, the Giants are paying so much money here for Kenny Golladay. They must have checked out the medicals, gone through everything, and said, okay, he's completely fine. Was he? No, he wasn't fine.
The Giants are a bad franchise. There's a chance they messed that up.
Right? So, I mean, and even if it's not the hip per se, it's all connected. I could sing the, hip bones connected to the thigh bone song for you all day long if you want. But I mean, that's the problem is like the hip, and then it puts everything out of alignment and it puts undue pressure on the knees and then the ankles. I think Kenny Golladay is going to continue to be a bust. I really do. I think, I don't think we're ever going to see Kenny Golladay reaching that, that level of where he was even, in his final season in Detroit. So I just, I'm not into that. I'm not really into Kadarius Toney either. Anytime somebody refers to one of their players as the Swiss Army knife of their team, forget it. Right. I mean, it's
it usually doesn't mean much because
right?
it means limited touches.
You know who was the last person to be dubbed the Swiss Army knife right before Kadarius Toney? It was Tavon Austin. And where is Tavon Austin right now? Right? Just a horror show.
Seriously.
So, I look at Toney and I think that he's got, for what they're going to be doing there in that passing game, he'll have his moments. If they can get him running out in space, if they can hit him in stride and release, we might see a couple of those, those underneath slants where he can take it, 20, 30 yards downfield just because of his speed. But, this is not a team that I want to invest anywhere in fantasy. Like I'll take the Saquon Barkley pick, right? If they're going to let him drop to me, in the late second round, early third, I'm going to grab Saquon Barkley because I do think that there's still tremendous talent there. I'm not into Kenny Golladay. I'm not into Kadarius Toney. If I were to take a shot on anybody on this Giants team, it would probably be using a final round pick on Sterling Shepard. Yeah, he's coming back from the Achilles injury, but is he any worse off than what Kenny Golladay is right now? And look at the ADP separation between those two. So I would rather just say, what, if the Giants are going to do that whole interchangeable cogs in the machine, and we're just going to wait to see who Daniel Jones favors the most out of all of that, I'll put the money on Sterling Shepard because I'm not wasting a pick that way. Anybody take it in the last round, last 2 rounds, depending on when you take your kicker and your defense, that should be an easy cut if that player doesn't pan out. So that's really the only way I'm investing in the Giants passing game.
Yeah, we saw, when Sterling Shepard was on the field last year, even with Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney there, he was fantastic. Sterling Shepard was just straight up fantastic. He was unbelievable.
He was good. Fantastic's a little bit much, Hutch. Come on.
He was great.
He's trying to be a nice guy, but
for what Daniel Jones, the numbers that Daniel Jones was putting up, and for what this offense was doing when he was on the field, Sterling Shepard did a fantastic job. So for fantasy,
in honor of you being an Eagles guy, I'm going to take the batteries out of this remote and start throwing them at you right now. So right? I'm going to do the Philly thing and just start chucking batteries at you through the webcam here because you're lying, man. You think this team sucks? Admit it. You think the Giants suck? Go ahead, say it.
No, I'm not a hater of the Giants. And look, I think they are going to be a bad team. They're straight, they're just not going to be a great team. But I'm still willing to invest in places in fantasy here because I think there's some talent on this team, and I think that there's room for Brian Dable to unlock one of these players. So I'm going to take.
I look forward to drafting against you, buddy. Oh yeah, you invest in Big Blue.
We're fighting about Sterling Shepard. Who
look, I'm just going to read these. Hold on. I'm just going to read these. Okay. So Sterling Shepard, right? His first 2 games that he was on the field. The third game, unfortunately, he got hurt. First 2 games, week 1 against Denver, he scored 24.3 PPR fantasy points. Week 2 against Washington, 17.5. 19 targets in that span. Howard.
What?
And then week 6,
LA
Rams.
Nice things about the Giants, and it made me fall asleep. What?
Week 6, LA Rams, 17.6 points. He was actually fantastic. If you put those 3 games together, if you put that on a points per game basis, that's actually putting up top 10 numbers.
How many people do you think started him for that game in fantasy?
Not many, but I know I did. I picked him up off the waiver wire. I was starting him.
What, the week after he did that?
The first week I did not start him, but the second week and the 6th week out, he was on a lot of my starting lineups.
Wow. Did you win championships in those leagues? Did you?
I don't remember specifically, but I won 2 leagues this year. So.
Oh, but you don't remember if Sterling Shepard was on either of those winning teams?
I can't say I specifically remember.
I think that's kind of what he's getting at, Hutch.
I understand because he was injured all year. What are you supposed to do?
Somebody call Nurse Andy because Hutch's nose is bleeding right now because he just got tagged.
Here's the one, and I'll cap this conversation. Here's the thing that I do like about Shepard. He's not the best wide receiver, but he can be reliable for a quarterback. He runs the majority out of the slot.
He's always right there.
Brian Dable, the last 2 years in that Buffalo Bills offense, has targeted the slot over 12 times per game.
That's where Sterling
Shepard. So if Shepard is healthy and he's playing, I think he can be a reliable target for Daniel Jones, which for me then provides some flex and wide receiver 3 upside. Well, and that's the thing. Howard, you touched on it. He's basically a last round dart throw.
Yeah, he's nothing in the drafts. People are valuing him at 0. He's valued at 0 in drafts. He's free.
My question then becomes: are they going to utilize Shepard, or because they spent a 2nd round pick on Wan'Dale Robinson, who also played a ton of slot at University of Kentucky in college, are they going to transition him into that role? Because if they transition Robinson into that role, there then becomes a lot of value if he's able to buck a lot of trends because of his size and et cetera. So I think for me, Robinson then becomes more of a dynasty dart throw, in late 2nd rookie drafts kind of thing, just to see if that comes to fruition. But Howard, we'll take maybe the next 60 to 90 seconds here. for dynasty purposes, when it comes to rookies, the Giants didn't spend a lot of high draft capital on offensive players. Who's a guy that you may be targeting as kind of like a late round dart throw as a stash on taxi squads?
Well, yeah, it's definitely not Wan'Dale Robinson, right? I mean, I might as well just say I'll draft Kevin Hart, right? I mean, what's that going to do for me? So,
he's going to make you laugh, and that is great for the locker room, damn it.
It's good locker room presence, 100%. You know what? I mean, I would probably, if like in a 5th or 6th round of a rookie draft, I would take a look at maybe Daniel Bellinger, the rookie tight end that they brought in here, simply because if you watch the way Dawson Knox developed under Daboll's system, your big time wide receivers can come and go. You got your Stephon Diggs, and now Gabriel Davis is there. But where is that? Where's that comfort factor inside the red zone? And that was Josh Allen seeking out, the route tree.
Yeah, they got rid of all their tight ends this year. Like they got rid of all their tight ends this year. Like Kyle Rudolph's gone, Evan Ingram's gone. Like they got rid of everybody. And they have Ricky Seals-Jones though, right?
Jones, I believe.
Yeah, they brought in Ricky Seals-Jones, who's average at best. Like that's what I think. I don't think they're going to be doing. They're not going to do a lot of heavy passing to the tight end right now. What they're going to do is I think they're going to develop Bellinger into a good, strong blocking tight end this year. Make sure that he gets that down. They know he can catch a pass if it's thrown his way.
Yeah,
every rookie tight end struggles. We've seen it a million times. So. I think long term, if you're looking from a dynasty standpoint, you just want to, again, it's a free pick in your rookie draft. You grab him and see if Daboll does develop this offense in similar fashion to what he did in Buffalo, then you might just have yourself a really good tight end red zone target.
Yeah, I mean, and additionally, like one quick point. Sorry, can I, Josh, real quick?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I know we got to move on to the next team, but the odds are that Daniel Jones is not the future quarterback for this team, right? I mean, the odds are definitely against Daniel Jones there. It looks like if Daniel Jones doesn't, come together this year, which based on what we've seen the last few years, it doesn't look likely. The Giants are probably going to look quarterback in 2023. And I mean, you got a young, probably stud quarterback. I mean, there's a lot of stud quarterbacks in this class. Whoever they draft is probably going to be pretty good developing with that young tight end in Bellinger. So I think Bellinger is a great shot in dynasty drafts, and I agree with you guys.
Love it. All right, so moving on to our final team, the Carolina Panthers. I'm really just going to read off what my co-host Ryan Weiss put in the notes on one of these guys. There are no high ADP players that truly are a trap on this team because no other player outside of Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore are draftable. And I think that pretty much sums up the Panthers. But we're going to try to make this a little interesting here. And Howard, going to need a lot of help here, buddy.
This is a tough team for it here, right?
Because it really is. I mean, look, when you bring in Ben McAdoo as your offensive coordinator, you basically damned your team from the start.
Yeah, it's McCaffrey, DJ Moore, and honestly, Deonta Foreman as a handcuff, I'm actually kind of interested.
No, there's nothing interesting about Deonta Foreman. There's nothing interesting.
He was successful in Tennessee.
Go back and look at everything you know.
He has nice hair, Howard. Let's give him some props.
Okay, aesthetically, he might be a little pleasing to the eye, sure, but
I'll still look. I don't care. Chuba Hubbard
He's a bum.
Chuba Hubbard was trash last year. I'll give a shot.
Well, but Deonta Foreman is trash as well. He's like, Oscar the Grouch, just chilling out in the can.
He put up some good fantasy numbers with Tennessee when Henry was out.
I'm gonna walk off this live stream.
I
know. Telling you, man.
I know. I'm sorry.
Tell you, I'm gonna come after you at the expo. All right. Come on. Talk to Colby Conway about Deonta Foreman. That was a guy who was trying to plant his flag in Deonta Foreman with just misery.
Yeah, I've never been a Deonta Foreman guy. I just liked what we saw from him last year in Tennessee, and I think he can make an impact in Carolina.
And you know what though? And here's a fun case study because Foreman, 2,000 yards at Texas, comes in with the Texans. There's some high hopes. Tears his Achilles. Hasn't really done much since. It's taken him a long time to really work his way back. And there's some guys this year that are coming off Achilles injuries that maybe we might need to pump the brakes a little bit on. I'm just going to, we'll leave it at that because obviously those are conversations for different shows. But,
yeah.
All right. So we'll start with fantasy upside. Hutch, you, myself, we've penciled in Christian McCaffrey. I don't really know how much. I mean, look, we've seen him be the overall RB1. We know how amazing this guy is when given the amount of touches. But we've also seen the last couple of years, because of those overall touches, his body is starting to break down. He's currently going as the RB5. It still feels low because we know he has RB1, overall RB1 upside, right?
Oh, yeah.
Ryan types in DJ Moore. I don't know how much upside you really have with DJ Moore, simply because he's going at wide receiver 15. He's never been a big touchdown guy. And his quarterback play has not gotten any better, let's be honest. This is Sam frickin' Darnold throwing him the ball. He's going to get hurt. Maybe he plays 12 games. Maybe he gets benched. We don't know. One thing I think we can all agree on is Matt Rule probably doesn't survive this season.
No chance. Matt Rule's gone during the season. And there is no upside with DJ Moore. I mean, DJ Moore is a very talented wide receiver. He is. But the quarterback, if he has this bad of a quarterback, because there's a very good argument for this being the worst quarterback room in the NFL right now, Sam Darnold and Matt Corral and whoever the heck they have. If they don't bring in Jimmy G or Baker Mayfield, this is probably the worst quarterback room in the NFL. DJ Moore has not been able to score a ton of touchdowns. He's not been able to put up that massive season we want from him with all the bad quarterbacks he's played with, and people keep falling into that trap again. Stop drafting DJ Moore as a top 20 wide receiver, because it's not going to happen. We know what Sam Darnold is.
I think he's still a top 20 wide receiver, Hutch. Let's not go that far. I just don't think he has wide receiver 1 upside is the problem.
He's got wide receiver 1 upside, but I agree with Hutch. The quarterback play is everything. If the guy feeding him the ball sucks, he's going to suck.
Yeah, especially if McCaffrey goes out. Like, if McCaffrey goes out, I mean, we were talking about it, the only players to draft from this offense are DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey. If Christian McCaffrey's gone, this offense is going to be horrendous. Like, absolutely horrendous. It's going to be horrendous no matter what. Even if Christian McCaffrey's on the field, it's going to be bad. Like, DJ Moore for me, I just don't see DJ Moore scoring more than like 6 touchdowns next year. And
I don't think he's ever scored more than 4, dude.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, even if because I'm trying to see if Christian McCaffrey stays healthy, this offense could be a little bit better than it was last season. But yeah, the upside is not really there for DJ Moore to be a top 10 or top 12 wide receiver. And in that range where you're looking at the middle round kind of wide receivers, outside the top 15, I want guys that have the potential to get there, to get to the top 10. DJ Moore just does not have it. And you're going to be frustrated with him all season long because of the quarterback play and because of the horrendous offense. I just can't draft a player. It's okay. I can't draft a wide receiver that high with the quarterback play. I just can't draft him that high because the upside is just not there.
We talk a lot about, some of these wide receivers that have just god awful quarterback play and how they're quote unquote quarterback proof. And for a long time, that was Allen Robinson, right? For a long time, that was Allen Robinson. And then last year, his entire season just absolutely fell out from under him, whether it was because of the quarterback play or he just wanted out and he was done. DJ Moore just signed a contract extension. He's here for the long haul. So I don't think we're going to get that sort of, I'm giving up on my team type of attitude. But again, we've seen him consistently, 1,100 yards, 80-plus catches. This is a guy that gets it done because of his ability to break tackles and create yards after the catch. So
I think if he was given a good quarterback, like an average or above average NFL quarterback, I think he could legit finish as a top 5 fantasy wide receiver in a solid offense. He could absolutely do that, but he just does not have the quarterback, and that's a lot. And he just doesn't have it.
On the flip side of that, there's something to be said for even consistent wide receiver 2 numbers. Right? Yeah. I mean, sure, he's going as wide receiver 15. I don't think he has the upside to be that wide receiver 1.
He's never even finished at wide receiver 15 in PPR ranks. He's never even finished there in his entire career.
Where's he been finishing then?
So I'm looking at one of my sleeper leagues, like a very standard PPR league right now. PPR, wide receiver 18, and this is 2021 down of the past 4 years. 18, 23, 16, 39. He's never finished at 15, and we're drafting him at 15. You're drafting him as absolute ceiling, and this is arguably the worst quarterback he's ever played with. Like, you're not going to get a top 15 season out of him, and you're drafting him like you're going to. It just has to stop. I just can't. You gotta stop falling into this trap with him.
Yeah, listen, it's a great point, and
I'm sorry, Josh. I know I'm like yelling.
No, hey, you're good. I have DJ Moore on some dynasty teams, right? To me, wide receiver 15 feels comfortable from a dynasty perspective. But again, this is why I think he's a trap, because I don't see that wide receiver 1 upside. But I also think there's something to be said even for consistent top 24 numbers, which you literally just read off all of his finishes. That's where he's at. I wouldn't draft him at wide receiver 15, but if I could get him at 21 or 22, I'm okay with that, because I know that's where he's going to finish. Absolutely.
That's fine. But yeah, if he's going like outside the top, like just outside the top 20 or even a little bit later, even, sure. Why not? I mean, he's going to get a ton of volume, but if he's going inside the top 20, I'm just not drafting a player at their near ceiling.
And I don't think you can, and I don't think you should. I mean, this is like, dynasty is one thing. If it's a brand new dynasty league, okay, fine. You can look to it. But like you said at the top of this, Josh, I mean, you bring in Ben McAdoo, you're almost raising the white flag. You're like, this is a guy, again, Joe Brady getting fired was garbage, man. That was Matt Rule. That was Matt Rule's.
That was a power play.
Finding a scapegoat for a crap season, and Matt Rule wanted to save his own job, so he threw Joe Brady under the bus, and that's it's ridiculously unfortunate. Then he brings in a guy like Ben McAdoo, who's just another terrible coach, doesn't design clean systems, doesn't have the respect of his players, and doesn't have the innovation, and the wherewithal to really kind of create a good system. He might have a couple of shining moments because Christian McCaffrey is healthy. But overall, no, this is not a team that I want to invest in one bit, early on in the year. What I'll do is I'll go to, because you have on your sheet, who are the players that you would draft off of this team. And like you guys, I'm not taking DJ Moore at his price tag there. I don't have any interest in Robbie Anderson, because there's obviously a rift between him and Sam Darnold that probably dates back to being the Jets. So Terrace Marshall Jr., that's the guy, right? Because what's going to happen is that you're going to be sitting there in a number of like 2 wide receiver sets at practice, right? You're going to have Sam Darnold on the field with Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson and, Tommy Tremble at tight end. Terrace Marshall Jr. is going to be the guy who's going to be sitting there at practice, chirping in the ear of Matt Corral. And then come the second half of the season, when Carolina is completely out of it, whether McCaffrey's healthy or not, Matt Corral is going to come in, and Matt Corral is going to connect with the guy who he's been most comfortable with at camp, and that's going to end up being Terrace Marshall Jr. Listen, he's got great talent. He's got great upside. He's a fantastic slot receiver, and he can run those short routes nice and crisp and clean and be helpful and beneficial to a quarterback. But listen, I just think that this is an offense that's treading water right now. And, come midway through the season, they're going to say, we got to pack this in, and we have to see what we've got right now from our kids. If we don't have the right pieces now, we've got to figure out what we need to go out and get. So, I think that, our days of worrying about where DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson are being drafted are gone. Like Sterling Shepard with the Giants, give me the free pick at the end of Terrace Marshall Jr.
Yeah. I like what you were mentioning here, because we see this all the time with backups kind of, trusting the guys on the squads that they're the ones throwing to, that are, second, third on the depth chart. And we see it all the time, guys coming in, throwing to those guys. If Marshall's chirping at Corral, and we know Corral eventually is going to get a shot, yeah, that paves the way for it. The problem then becomes, how does that look going forward in 2023 and beyond? Because if you bring in a whole brand new coaching staff, now Corral has more to prove going forward. Marshall has more to prove. And so many of us were high on Marshall simply because he was coming into Joe Brady's system, because he had Joe Brady as his offensive coordinator in LSU, in Baton Rouge. So I think with Marshall, We saw him absolutely faceplant last year. Where does that really leave him going forward? But again, we saw Robbie Anderson just freaking faceplant too after a career season. So it's like, is it the player or is it the offense? And I think it's an interesting conundrum that fantasy players are going to face. So real quick, we'll let you wrap up your thoughts on the Panthers, and then I'll kind of close out the show.
Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up with Terrace Marshall here. I think he is a talented wide receiver. I think he does have some talent, but right now I just cannot draft him for fantasy football. I mean, I'm not even willing to draft DJ Moore. No way am I willing to draft the second wide receiver on the Panthers led by Sam Darnold and a completely new coaching staff who Terrace Marshall's going to have to prove himself to. Like, I just don't really think that Terrace Marshall has the potential, right? I mean, it has the potential, but it's such a steep uphill battle for him right now with the quarterback, with the completely new coaching staff, with DJ Moore in his way, with Christian McCaffrey out there taking passes. It's just so difficult, and to see him stepping up and becoming a fantasy relevant wide receiver this season. I think we're going to have to wait and see until Carolina gets a legit quarterback, which honestly, if they let Matt Corral start for a little bit and let him try and he fails, it could be a few years before we see Terrace Marshall with a legit quarterback. And that's really sad it's really sad to say and really sad hearing coming out of my mouth, but it's really true because I don't know how good Matt Corral is. I don't really think he's very good. I don't trust many of the quarterbacks in this draft class, and I don't think any of us do. So Carolina might try to stick with him, and it really might not work out, and that's really going to hurt Terrace Marshall.
Howard. I agree with you that it's gonna hurt. There's just so much. The team's terrible. The team's terrible. It was a horrible choice, to bring in Ben McAdoo. We know Matt Rule's on his way out. His whole team is going to be problematic. So I think that, if we want to recommend anything to those watching, it's just avoid all of them. I mean, you want to take that shot on McCaffrey because you think he's going to get the volume. Go ahead. You know the risk that's involved there. The rest of this offense could be pretty disgusting.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Just end with this notion, guys. We all know that Matt Rule is waving those white flags. Sam Darnold's just going to interpret them as ghosts, and there goes your entire season with Sam Darnold.
There it goes. Yep. Exactly.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you, Hutch, Howard. This has been a lot of fun. Apparently, we just need to do this type of podcast every single week, and Joe and Ryan can go do their own thing now.
Dial me up. I'm in.
Exactly.
I love it. Hutch, remind everybody where they can find you and all the work that you've got going on between Football Guys and your own podcast, The Young Fantasy Market.
All right, so you guys can all follow me on Twitter at TYFMNFL. Check out the Young Fantasy Mind Football Podcast, the podcast I host. It's pretty much my main thing. But I've also got a job creating YouTube videos for Football Guys. I create shorts on their YouTube channel every single Tuesday. And with DLF, I write articles for DLF. I'm a writer over there. So if you got a subscription to DLF, you can go check out those articles on their website.
Howard.
You can find me on the pages at fantasyalarm.com. You can find me on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio every Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. You can find me on the Ante Up podcast on all podcast platforms. And you can find me inside the nightmares of all of Hutch's fantasy football dreams because I'm going to ruin them this year.
Oh, man.
This is so much fun. So much fun. I absolutely love being able to be on a podcast with you guys. And Howard, I can't wait until we start working together, developing our Women of Fantasy show for Fantasy Alarm. That's going to be
amazing. That's going to be absolutely amazing. I'm very excited for that too.
Very excited to be working with you and Britt Flynn to bring that to life. So as you guys know, these are our look inside shows. These are us going through and putting together team previews on a video form. We also have written articles as well. So if you head over to clubfantasyffl.com, you can see all of our written articles over the first week. Ryan Weiss previewed Travis Etienne. Kelly in Phoenix on Twitter, previewed Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Lions. And one of our newest writers, Steve Lawson, took a look at Brandon Cooks for the Houston Texans. By the time this show airs, you'll also see one of our contributors, Chris Molina, with an article out on Breece Hall for the Jets. And another one of our contributors, Drew Metcalf, is going to have an article up on one Kadarius Toney for the Giants. So it's going to be a little interesting to see which side of the coin he takes, and obviously compared to what we took on here. So again, clubfantasyffl.com, you can get all of those articles, including some other stuff that we've got cooking in the book. So for that, next week, we're going to be live again. It's going to be nice. Hopefully we'll have the whole crew back. And we've got a great guest, Miss Linda Godfrey, the kicker queen herself, who contributes with Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life doing kicker tiers. She's going to help us break down the Chicago Bears, the Atlanta Falcons, and her Denver Broncos, which is going to be a lot of fun because we know that she is Team Cole Kmet. And over here, no pun intended, we most certainly are anti-Cole Kmet.
Yeah, this is the most anti-Cole Kmet podcast of all time.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain that entire 20 minutes on the Bears is going to be her and Joe going back and forth on why Cole Kmet is either good or absolute trash. And it will be brought up that Hutch, you, myself, and Howard combined for the same amount of touchdowns that Cole Kmet had in the 2021 season. I'm just throwing that out there. For Hutchinson Brown at TYFM NFL, for Howard Bender at RotoBuzzGuy, for myself, Joshua Hudson at the One Hudsonian, for my missing co-host, Ryan Weiss at DFantasy5, that's 5 spelled out, and for Joe Zolo, Joe at Joe_Zolo. You can follow Club Fantasy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Club Fantasy FFL. The URL is clubfantasyffl.com. Be sure to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube page. We recently crossed 350 subscribers, and we would very much love to get that up, especially as we march toward our Women of Fantasy Football event series in August. It is going to be fantastic. We are partnering with Laura Oakman and her organization Galvanize to raise money for a scholarship fund that we are putting together to help women in sports attend her boot camps. And she just did the Jacksonville Jaguars boot camp. And if you haven't seen any of our retweets from our Club Fantasy page, it is popping. She is helping a lot of women get a much needed experience in this industry. And it's something that we are immensely proud to be involved in. So be sure to follow us and get ready because this summer is going to be fantastic. Everybody, we will see you guys next week. And we're back to being live. Stay tuned.